Can this Trump populist nationalist rally that's spreading across the world, can it pull the world markets up into a true global recovery? Or is it like a sugar high, and a sugar high that I want, because at least it's a bubble keeping us from a total collapse or depression, that might actually create some new industry and jobs in the United States, and the U.S. is kind of one of the better houses in a bad neighborhood, and we're entering into a trade war. It looks like an economic war with the communist Chinese. I mean, if you looked at where we were going, it was bad. And so, yes, it's another bubble we're riding with Trump. But isn't that all we've got as bubbles? I mean, is that what you're getting at?
It's a very difficult thing to clean the swamp of Washington, because there's so many parties and there's so many organizations. Just to get the documentation that you need from the FBI or CIA, they resist actually telling you what they have been doing. And so, yes, he's doing a great job relative to what he can do. You understand, in China, Xi Jinping has the power. He can say, I'm going to do this, and that will be done. Nothing else. Trump and any Western leader doesn't have that power. There are people behind the scene that pull the strings and so forth. And so he's much more constrained than, say, a Chinese leader or, let's say, Vladimir Putin.
Is an amazing individual, a lot of great economic predictions and laurels under his belt. He's Marc Faber, editor and publisher of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report. That's gloomboomdoom.com, and I'm not going to go over all of his long bio or books or reports. I want to get right into what's happening in the global economy. We were trying to get him on for weeks on other big issues and on this recovery, and the Democrats trying to sabotage it, and the EU and migration. But now you've got China is reportedly thinking of halting U.S. Treasury purchases. That's worrying markets right now. The markets are down some, but still well above 25,000 on the Dow Jones. So what does he make of all of this? What is his overall breakdown on Trump lowering our taxes to what the Chinese communists have, and now they're going to lower to zero, ask companies to become state-run? Just amazing things. So I could ask a lot of questions, but I want him to cover the waterfront from the Gloom, Boom, Doom report. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Well, my pleasure, Alex.
Well, what should we tackle first? So much is going on.
Yes. Well, we can talk about the global economy, which is kind of strengthening somewhat. But as you know, a lot of this strength is due to government deficits and to money printing. In other words, the expansion of balance sheets of central banks and, of course, of credit growth, which is very strong. So it's kind of a mixed recovery. It's been very good for assets. Asset prices since 2009 have not only recovered, but they've gone and made new highs. Bonds, stocks, dollar was strong until a year ago. Commodities have also done quite well over the last 12 months. So real estate has equally gone up around the world. We had really an exceptional kind of a asset recovery, asset bubble, I would say. And that has led to stronger economic growth that looks reasonably good on the surface. But if you dig deeper, it's, of course, unstable economic growth.
And that's exactly where I was going next. Can this Trump populist nationalist rally that's spreading across the world, can it pull the world markets up into a true global recovery? Or is it like a sugar high, and a sugar high that I want, because at least it's a bubble keeping us from a total collapse or depression, that might actually create some new industry and jobs in the United States, and the U.S. is kind of one of the better houses in a bad neighborhood, and we're entering into a trade war It looks like an economic war with the communist Chinese. I mean, if you looked at where we were going, it was bad. And so, yes, it's another bubble we're riding with Trump. But isn't that all we've got as bubbles? I mean, is that what you're getting at?
Yes, I think we've got a lot of bubbles, and I need to correct you. I don't think that you can call the Chinese communists any longer. It's a one-party system, the Communist Party, but it's anything but communist. It's ultra-capitalistic, with lots of very wealthy people having been created both through state subsidies and privileges, but as well as through private initiative. So, I mean, we've had in China, I'd say almost a robber baron capitalism in the last few years, and that has propelled the economy forward. We have less regulation than in the US, we have less socialism than in Europe, and that has been very favorable for the economy.
Well, I totally agree with you that China is an authoritarian one-party kleptocracy where the upper party members and members of the Politburo and Central Committee are billionaires, and then they are killing Buddhists and Christians for practicing their religion secretly. It's a ultra corrupt, evil elite, hardworking, good people under them. It's a true travesty, and I never see our media even criticizing communist China anymore. Do you agree with a lot of economists that China is in a much more precarious position than even we are with their state-run system trying to prop up at 10% growth rates, that our bubble is underpinned with some problems, but that their bubble is even much more dangerous?
Well, I think we had huge credit growth in China. In fact, according to the Bank of International Settlement, no country ever had the kind of credit growth China had over the last 5 to 8 years in terms of percentage increase. However, and I'd need to point this out, whereas in the Western world, credit growth flows into transfer payments. In other words, it goes into people's pockets from one pocket into the other. In China, a lot of infrastructure has been built with this credit growth. And this infrastructure benefits actually economic growth in the long run. So if you look at, say, the infrastructure in China, in Shanghai, Beijing, and so forth, and other cities, and you compare it to the infrastructure in the US, with few exceptions, the US has actually very poor infrastructure.
Yes, it's rotting. And you
yes.
see that, you see the globalists moving from the US to China, building them up, saying they're the future. And then Trump, it looks like, is trying to imitate China, but not with authoritarianism, just letting us have jobs, trying to build up infrastructure. And I've seen Lloyd Blankfein making fun of him in tweets, saying China's better, you'll never stop us. I mean, it looks like there's a lot of, I guess you could say, China files in the global elite, and they're betting on China, and that's one reason they hate Trump so much, is he's trying to bet on America.
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't write off America, but we have to see very clearly. Say, in 1750, in other words, approximately 250 years ago, China and India accounted for approximately 60% of the global economy. And then came the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and the huge progress we have achieved through inventions and innovations, and the application of these innovations to industry and commerce in Europe and in the US. And as a result of that, the percentage of India and China of the global economy declined to less than 5% in the 1950s, partly also due to failed political decisions, partly communism in China and in India.
And then the West gave them the Promethean, and then the West gave them the Promethean fire of the Renaissance, and now we're being double-crossed.
And now, what has happened in the last, say, 20, 30 years is that the Western countries experience a relative decline. And there's nothing you can do against this relative decline. You can try to age well. I'm in a relative decline. I'm not as strong as I was when I was 20 years old. And I can't do sports as well as when I was 25 years old. So I'm in a relative decline. But I can try to age well as well as you. So we have to try to do that. And as Western societies, in my opinion, we have actually accelerated our decline with failed policies by essentially socialist-minded.
Well, let's talk about
government.
that. And the socialists say they want to kill the West. It is a self-loathing. It is the culture, and it will destroy the prosperity of the very SJWs calling for its collapse. Dr. Marc Faber, the editor and publisher of the Gloom, Boom, Doom Report, with us with one more segment of where this collapse is going. And then we'll be in the hands of murderous one-party system. Alex Jones here, back live. The Daily Mail, one of the most popular newspapers in the UK, has a lot of hard-hitting news. They also have like a swimsuit section of, you know, girls in bikinis or whatever. I like it. It's one of my favorite online papers. They've been banned on Virgin Atlantic train stations and trains because the head of it says that it's xenophobic to even cover immigration issues. Well, Marc Faber, who's been on every TV show out there, you know, is a top expert, editor, and publisher of the Gloom, Boom, Doom Report, he got called racist and evil for even talking about the demographics and the Islamicists being brought into Europe and how the West is committing suicide. But then Peter Sutherland, that engineered all this, who just died, by the way, yesterday, the head of the EU program and the founder of the modern EU, he headed up the migration operation now, and he said we're going to get rid of Western civilization. So there's a vitriol against it when the technology and the system of it will work in other cultures. And if everybody just wants to die and not have kids, then let people come into the, you know, high-tech, you know, space-based system, and then humanity can just move forward. Because we've certainly seen the West before it really was modern, you know, living in squalor as well. But there is a war against it by authoritarians who want to break away civilization and don't want the general public to have access to free market and success. And that's the technocracy Google talks about, and that's why they hate Marc Faber. So super respected, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, everything you can imagine, suddenly persona non grata because he dares talk about the reality of it's not just the death of the West, as you said, it's the accelerated death. Why are Western elites fetishizing Dr. Faber, the death of the West?
Well, I also wonder why. But we have to see one thing very clearly. Say, if you look at the last 20, 30 years, wealthy people, in other words, the asset holders, have become immensely rich as a result of money printing and credit growth. And the average household, the typical household in the US, the typical household in Western countries in Europe has had essentially a declining standard of living. I would actually say that most boomers, the people like myself, born just after the war, their children will die poorer than we will die, and they will earn less money. And this is statistically proven that in real terms, inflation adjusted, they earn less. Most young people cannot afford to buy a house, cannot afford to buy an apartment, unless they have parents who will buy it for them. But otherwise, on their own, they can't do that.
And as you've said, is this not social engineering where they have set it up, Russia's trying to change this, to not have families? They've engineered it to not just deindustrialize, but depopulate the West. And then once you've depopulated it, then you've got third world. That is not a good prognosis. So why has everything been set up to have crony capitalism, to transfer wealth to the Jeff Bezoses of the world while he runs around on his anti-family jihad?
Yes, well, there are many explanations for that. But I'd say our entitlement society and the socialist thought that everybody should be precisely equal, when in fact some people are born a little bit more intelligent and some people are born with some more money than others. I mean, it maybe is sad to say so, but we're just not all exactly equal. Some people can go to Harvard and most people cannot. And so we have in the Western world this tendency to move and equalize everything. That I will never understand, that we have fought against communism and socialism for years, for maybe the last 100 years, and now we introduce it to the back, through the back door.
Well, that's right.
And I think this is a huge failure of democracy. And I'm not sure that democracy will survive in the long run. This democracy is an experiment. For the last 5,000 years of history, we had essentially all kinds of systems. But for the last 200 years, we have had this movement towards democracy. And it's only just recent that everybody can vote. This is not...
And now they're using democracy to vote out democracy with new permanent elite classes based on their race or what color they are, attempting to replace something that they see they're threatened by, but really it's the system that brought them in.
Yes, precisely. It's like in Animal Farm, where some pigs are more equal than others. Some animals are more equal than others. And for me, it's very difficult to understand this frame of mind that we just actually accelerate our relative decline, which would happen anyway. So we had different civilizations. We had the Persian civilization. We had the Egyptian civilization. We had the Greeks, the Romans. We had the Spanish Empire, the British Empire. We had the supremacy of America.
But none of those committed suicide consciously. We have an elite committing suicide because they know what they're doing. As you said, they take the pie and they take 30% of the money and they collectivize it to domesticate the mass of the people. Then less than 1% transfers through crony capitalism most of the wealth up here, and they're in control. But these people are destroying the engine of their own success, even though it's been transferred to the breakaway civilization, which is waging war against the nouveau riche and the very engines of wealth, pulling up the ladder of success to create a permanent elite class and a giant underclass. This is the conscious movement of civilization into neo-feudalism. Is it not, Dr. Faber?
Yes, that's a good expression, neo-feudalism. That I'd say. Actually, it's a very bad feudalism, because most of the feudals, they had actually some education, whereas today's elite frequently has no education whatsoever.
How long do you think, I mean, what do you think of Trump, just in closing? I mean, do you think he's a good guy? Do you think he's doing it? I mean, what advice would you give him?
Well, as you know, it's a very difficult thing to clean the swamp of Washington, because there's so many parties and there's so many organizations. Just to get the documentation that you need from the FBI or CIA, they resist actually telling you what they have been doing. And so, yes, he's doing a great job relative to what he can do. You understand, in China, Xi Jinping has the power. He can say, I'm going to do this, and that will be done. Nothing else. Trump and any Western leader doesn't have that power. There are people behind the scene that pull the strings and so forth. And so he's much more constrained than, say, a Chinese leader or, let's say, Vladimir Putin.
You're absolutely right. And then there's so much treachery because we've been so wealthy and so spoiled. There's all these spoiled brats that won't get behind something good, because we're not a dictatorship, but get behind it to make it happen for everybody. No, they all want to say they're better, and just run around and engage.